$340. That's what's sitting in your checking account the morning you turn 29, 3 days after your roommate of 6 years moves out to live with his girlfriend, taking half the furniture and, more importantly, half the rent split that's kept your budget technically functional since you were 23. It's a Sunday. You're sitting on the floor of a half-empty living room because the couch left with him too, laptop balanced on your knees, and you finally open the budgeting app you downloaded 8 months ago and never once looked at again because what it showed you the first time was too uncomfortable to sit with twice. The apartment echoes differently now. The specific hollow sound of space makes once half its furniture and all its background noise has left at once. You'd offered to help him carry boxes down 3 flights of stairs the day he moved out, both of you keeping the conversation carefully light, the kind of forced normalcy 2 people manage when neither wants to acknowledge how much is actually changing. He'd hugged you at the truck and said you should get lunch sometime. You both knew, in the specific way you know these things, that you probably wouldn't, not the way you used to when getting lunch just meant walking into the next room. Tonight you look anyway. Income $52,600 a year. An electrician's apprentice wage that felt like real money at 22 and has quietly stopped stretching the way it used to. $4,380 a month before taxes becomes $3,510 after. Rent, now entirely yours instead of split, $1,450. Truck payment, $340. Insurance, $190. Phone and utilities, $210. Groceries, you estimate generously $380. That leaves $940. Your bank statement says you've actually been spending closer to $1,280 a month in the category labeled miscellaneous, which turns out to mean everything you don't want to look at directly. You've been going backward by $340 a month for over a year. The exact number, you notice with a small bitter laugh, currently sitting in your account. You don't fix anything that night. You just sit with the number in the dark, half-empty living room, and something small and stubborn wakes up in your chest. The specific feeling of a person who's finally tired of being surprised by their own life. Here's what nobody tells you starting this at 29. You are not too late. You are also not getting the easy version, the one finance books use where you start at 22 with nothing to lose and 40 years of runway ahead of you. Your 20s are most of the way gone. That's real, and it's worth sitting with for exactly one night, the way you're sitting with it now. Then you close the laptop and go to bed on a mattress with no frame because the frame left with the couch too. You sell your old motorcycle the following weekend, the one you haven't ridden in 2 years and kept insuring out of a stubbornness you can't fully explain. $2,100. You cancel a gym membership you haven't used since March, $60 a month back. You start meal prepping Sundays instead of grabbing lunch from the truck near the job site, a habit the other apprentices tease you about lightly for the first few weeks until it stops being noteworthy at all. You open a high-yield savings account and set an automatic transfer for $200 a month, the day after payday, before you have a chance to talk yourself out of it. The buyer for the motorcycle is a kid about the age you were when you bought it, 23 maybe. Eyes lit up the exact way yours must have been years earlier. You almost talk yourself out of the sale twice while he's counting cash in your driveway. Some part of you mourning a version of yourself that used to ride it to the lake every weekend before work got busier and the bike started just sitting under a tarp collecting dust and insurance premiums. You watch him pull out of the driveway and you don't feel lighter exactly. You feel something closer to relieved, the way you'd feel setting down a bag you didn't realize you'd been carrying. You are 30. The transfer has become invisible the way habits eventually do. You check the account on a random Tuesday and it reads $1,180. You sit with that longer than the number seems to deserve. Nobody claps for $1,180. Your coworker Tobias, who's been on the crew with you since your apprenticeship started, wouldn't understand why it matters if you told him, so you don't tell him. You just feel something solid settle in your chest that wasn't there the year before, proof that you can actually redirect the trajectory of something instead of just watching it happen to you. You start bringing your lunch on job sites now as a matter of course rather than a novelty, And somewhere around month 8 you notice you've stopped doing the mental math every single time a coworker suggests grabbing food from the truck outside. It's just no anymore, easy, automatic, the same way the transfer itself became automatic. You don't announce the habit to anyone. You just live inside it, the way you live inside any decision that's finally stopped requiring willpower to maintain. You are 31. You automate $350 a month now into a Roth IRA, split from a raise that came with your journeyman certification, money that leaves before you see it land anywhere you'd be tempted to spend it. Then your truck's alternator dies on a Wednesday morning in a job site parking lot. The specific dead-click sound that means you're not driving anywhere until someone fixes it. The quote comes back at $780. 2 years earlier, this goes on a card you'd resent for months. Instead, you pay it from savings, rebuild the fund over the following 6 weeks, and feel, standing in that parking lot waiting for a ride, something steadier than relief, the specific quiet confidence of an emergency that stayed exactly the size it actually was instead of becoming a crisis. Tobias offers you a ride home that afternoon while your truck waits at the shop, and somewhere in the 20-minute drive he asks, almost offhand, how you always seem to handle these things so calmly. You tell him you've just gotten used to keeping a cushion, which is true and also a considerably smaller version of the actual answer. He nods, changes the radio station, and the conversation moves on the way conversations about money always seem to move on before anyone gets too close to the actual mechanics underneath it. You are 32. The market drops 21% that spring, the kind of drop that dominates every financial headline for 2 straight months. You check your account daily for the first 2 weeks, the way everyone does the first time it happens to money that's actually yours. Then you force yourself to stop checking, keep contributing anyway, buying shares at prices that feel wrong every single time you authorize the transfer. By November, the account has recovered and then some. But the real shift that year has nothing to do with the recovery. You're standing in a hardware store needing new work boots, holding 2 pairs, one at $89, one at $215 with a steel toe rated for twice as many hours and a warranty that actually means something on a job site. Old you grabs the cheap ones without thinking twice. This time you do the math, cost per where across the years you'll actually use them, and you buy the $215 pair. You sit in your truck afterward and realize you've started thinking in years instead of paychecks, a wiring change nobody announces and nobody can really teach you, one that just quietly happens once you've kept a habit running long enough for it to become instinct instead of discipline. You notice the shift again a few weeks later, standing in front of a display of power tools you don't strictly need yet but will eventually, and instead of the old impulse to buy now while you can afford it, you find yourself asking a completely different question, whether owning it a year early is actually worth the capital sitting somewhere else doing something more useful in the meantime. You don't buy the tool. You write the model number in a note on your phone instead, for later, when the job actually requires it rather than when the wanting simply shows up first. You are 33. Your company loses a major contract that winter, and the layoffs that follow take out nearly a quarter of the crew over 3 weeks. You are not among them, but you run the numbers the way you've learned to run them before you actually need to, and your emergency fund alone covers 5 months at your current spending. 2 years earlier, you were 1 bad paycheck from a genuine crisis. Now you're 5 months away from having to seriously think about it, and that gap is the entire story nobody tells you about what building this actually buys. You watch 2 apprentices you trained get let go in the same week, good hands, hard workers, laid off for reasons that had nothing to do with their skill and everything to do with a contract falling through in a boardroom neither of them ever sat in. You help one of them put together a resume that weekend, not because you have any particular expertise in it, just because you remember exactly what that specific kind of fear looks like on a person's face and you'd rather do something useful with the memory than just feel bad about it. That same year, Tobias buys a boat, financed over 8 years at a rate he mentions once and never brings up again, calling the payment basically nothing, the way people do when they haven't let themselves do the real math on it yet. You're standing on his dock the weekend he shows it off, and you feel the pull of it completely, the specific gravity of something shiny that a friend clearly loves. A voice in your head asks if all this discipline has actually entitled you to something too. You notice the voice. You don't argue with it or shame yourself for having it. You just let it pass the way you'd let weather pass, because you've learned by now that the question was never whether you wanted the boat. The question is what 8 years of payments actually costs you in the years you're trying to build instead. You helped Tobias back the boat onto its trailer that evening, both of you soaked and laughing about nothing in particular, and for a few hours the entire calculation running quietly in your head just goes quiet too, replaced by the simpler, older feeling of two friends messing around on a lake the way you did a decade earlier before either of you had a mortgage or a portfolio or a rate you didn't want to mention out loud. Your portfolio crosses $60,000 that same spring, a number that doesn't feel like a milestone so much as a foundation finally solid enough to hold real weight. This is the number you realize that makes the next 15 years of compounding actually mean something, and it exists specifically because you started at 29 instead of waiting until the version of you that felt fully ready, a version you suspect now that was never actually going to arrive on its own. You are 35. Your younger sister calls on a Thursday night, careful in the way she gets when she's rehearsing something, and tells you she's 3 months behind on rent after a stretch of reduced hours at her job, $2,700 total, and she doesn't know what to do and hates asking. You tell her not to be sorry, that you'll cover it, and you transfer the money the next morning without touching your investments, without debt, without the quiet spiral of resentment that would have accompanied this exact request 5 years earlier when covering it would have meant genuinely not eating well for 2 months afterward. She thanks you like you did something extraordinary. You tell her it's nothing, and for the first time you understand you mean that almost literally, the way a large tank barely registers a single cup of water being drawn from it. That's the moment, more than any account balance, that you finally understand what the last 6 years were actually building toward. Not a number. Capacity. The ability to say yes to someone you love without it costing you your own footing. You drive out to see her a few weeks later, mostly just to check in, and she shows you the new work schedule that finally stabilized her hours again, proud in a small, careful way, like she's still expecting you to bring up the money even though you have no intention of doing so. You don't. You just help her rearrange a bookshelf and stay for dinner, and somewhere over dishes she asks, almost too casually, how you always seem to have things handled. You tell her the truth this time, plainly, the $200 transfer, the boots, the alternator, 6 years of it. She listens more carefully than you expect her to. You are 37. Your portfolio starts generating more in a single year from growth alone than you're putting into it through contributions, a specific quiet crossover that happens sometime that spring without any announcement at all. You have no debt beyond your mortgage now. A small house you closed on 2 years earlier with a down payment that came directly from the account that started with $200 a month and a half-empty living room. You've also noticed something nobody mentions in any of this. Most of the people you're closest to, people you've known since your apprenticeship, aren't doing any of this, and you've stopped bringing it up after watching 2 attempts land nowhere. You split bills evenly even when you ordered less. You don't perform discipline as a personality. You just carry the gap quietly, the way you'd carry a draft from a window you can never quite find the source of. You go to Tobias's 40th birthday that summer, a backyard gathering with the boat parked prominently in the driveway, still not paid off, still described as basically nothing whenever anyone asks. You have a genuinely good time. You mean that. The friendship survived the years without needing either of you to understand the other's exact numbers, and somewhere late in the evening, watching him laugh at his own joke the way he's done since you were both apprentices, you feel something closer to gratitude than distance, even with the gap still sitting quietly between you the way it has for years now. You turn 38 on an ordinary Tuesday, and before coffee, before anything, you lie in bed and think about the half-empty living room, the $340, the app you almost didn't open a second time. Then you check the number. $312,000. Not wealthy by any dramatic measure, but 38 years old with more than 9 times the median net worth for your age bracket. Built from a breakup, a sold motorcycle, and a $200 transfer that felt too small to matter the week you started it. You think about what actually changed underneath the number, the specific texture of an alternator failure that stayed an errand instead of becoming a spiral, a sister's rent covered without a second thought, a boat you didn't buy that you still, honestly, sometimes think about. You didn't get the easy version of this, the one that starts at 22 with nothing to lose. You got the version that starts on a floor with no couch at 29, tired enough of being surprised to finally stop looking away. You get up, make coffee, and drive out to a job site the same as any other Tuesday, because the habit was never really about the number arriving someday. It was about the version of you that kept showing up for 6 years without needing anyone to notice, the same way you're going to keep showing up tomorrow, and the day after that, whether or not the number ever gets big enough for anyone else to clap for it. Somewhere tonight, someone else is sitting on a similar floor with a similar number, certain the window already closed on them years ago. Didn't. The window was never your 20s. The window is whatever night you finally decide to open the app a second time.